Hi, this is Edward Nawatka. I'm here on behalf of the Abu Dhabi Book Fair to introduce Bapsi Sidhwa, who is one of the featured authors at this year's book fair. How are you today?
Very well, thank you, Ed.
And to give an introduction, if you wouldn't mind just telling us a little bit about yourself and offer a little bit of an introduction to your works to the people who might be seeing this who won't be familiar with them.
I'm basically a novelist,
Mm-hmm.
and I've written about 5 novels, starting with A Pakistani Bride,
Yes.
which was my first novel.
Okay.
I had never written anything before that, and I went on my honeymoon to the Karakoram Mountains. I was, it was a mystical experience to be in those mountains for me, and I heard the story of a little girl who was killed there. Anyway, I came back and I felt I had to tell this girl's story, and I thought I'd write a short story, and it became my first novel.
And this was when you were born in Pakistan.
I was born in Pakistan. I didn't migrate uh, till I was in my early 40s. So I've been all my life in Pakistan.
Do you remember what year that was?
Uh, oh my gosh, don't ask me years. It was quite some time back.
But you were
Because
born.
I moved in and out of. I'm even now I've visited Pakistan last year and this year, so I go very frequently.
Mhm.
I had my house there, which I've just sold.
And so you've written 5 novels.
Yes.
And
So I started with The Pakistani Bride. Then I wrote The Crow Eaters, which just means people who talk too much, as you'll discover in this. And this was about my small Zoroastrian Parsi community. We are only about 120,000 in the whole world. We are a very dodo birds of religion. It used to be a major religion. Cyrus the Great, Darius, they were all Zoroastrian kings. And now we are nothing. So I thought I'd write something about my community, and it became the book The Crow Eaters, a very funny book. And it was a seminal book because it was the first book ever written with Parsi characters. Otherwise, nobody would write about Parsis. And suddenly, after that, I met Parsi writers, who said, "Oh, we thought Parsis weren't worthy of writing," and now they started writing, including Rohit Mistry and all those. There were no Parsi characters in any book, even Midnight's Children, after I wrote Crow Eaters. He wrote about Parsi characters. And Vikram Seth, I met him. They would have never written funny Parsi characters unless it was from the Crow Eaters. I think that book influenced a lot of Indian writers. It was funny, it was, risque, irreverent, and it made people write like that.
And this was in the early 80s, is that
This
correct?
was, yeah, yeah.
And this was originally
India published it first,
Mm-hmm.
and they brought up, no, I self-published it first.
Yes.
Then India published it, and they told me to cut away about 40 pages because they wanted to make the book very cheap.
Okay.
And then Jonathan Cape in Britain published it, and then in America. So it had a history.
Yes. And so the Crow Eaters established this Parsi as a viable set of characters.
Absolutely.
Set of
Yes, nobody had heard of them. Nobody in India, of course, they'd heard of them, but nobody wanted to write about them. They didn't feel a sense of ease writing about them, and suddenly they were able to.
And this was well, when you started your writing career. I mean, I believe you had already been married and had numerous children.
Well,
at that
I was
point.
married twice.
Okay.
So I was married first in Bombay, and I became an Indian citizen. But I was divorced very soon. So in about 5-6 years, I was back in Pakistan, got remarried, and then on my second honeymoon, that's when I went to the Karakoram Mountains and wrote about the Pakistani Bride. So after I wrote The Crow Eaters, which book was my breakthrough book because it was published in Britain, and it won the David Hyham Award for first books. The award was withdrawn strangely because Bhutto banged his shoe. Mr. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto banged his shoe and retired from the Commonwealth or something stupid like that. And then I wrote Cracking India,
Yes.
which is about the partition of India and Pakistan from the point of view of a very small Zoroastrian Parsi child. And I found that a very useful vehicle for writing about passions of the Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs in a more fair. I felt I could write about it more fairly. Otherwise, books that came out of India naturally had an Indian bias, a Hindu bias. Books that came out of Pakistan had a different Pakistani bias. And I felt I could present this very emotional topic more fairly. And people in India and Pakistan loved it. Even in America, it is taught in. I think there's not one university that has not taught it.
It's
Yeah.
part of the Modern Library's top 200 books in English. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
yeah.
When by writing from the perspective of a child it was also originally had a different title. It was the
It was called Ice Candy Man in Britain
Yes.
and in India, Pakistan. And then when it came here, my publisher here said, ice candy can mean a drug peddler.
Right.
So they said the word India should be in the book. Because people, then if they're interested in India, at least they'll buy that book.
Yes.
Otherwise, it'll fall through all sorts of cracks. I think it was a wise move because it did very well in America.
When you say you could write more fairly about it from a Zoroastrian point of view,
Not Zoroastrian
or
point
from
of
a
view.
child's point of view.
Child's point of view, because a child's point of view sees very directly.
Okay.
They have not yet learned to hate people or learned bias or prejudice.
Right.
And when I wrote this book, I inhabited the child's persona, and I found myself shedding all these prejudices, so that when I was writing, I was able to keep a sense of fairness to each community.
It's a lovely notion because a child is relatively naive of the
Yeah.
politics
Yeah.
or the religious biases
Yeah. Yeah.
and at the time it was a difficult being a woman writer during this time because we're talking several decades past.
It was published in '94 out here.
Okay. And so was that something that you felt you needed to be older to be able to approach this topic or to be able to do it, or?
It is very amazing because I mean, by the time I was 32, I had written The Crow Eaters and A Pakistani Bride,
Okay.
and I was brought up in a very sheltered atmosphere, a puritanical Pakistan, puritanical Lahore, a Parsi child in that milieu. And after I wrote these books, I discovered I was much wiser than I thought. So if you have the natural gift for writing, I feel something else kicks in, a sort of inherited memory. Something kicks in, and then you can write. You don't have to be much older to write.
Sure.
So I was quite young when I wrote Cracking India.
Yes.
It's very complex. It's very difficult, in a way. But I did find it my most difficult book to write.
Okay.
But it is also critically the most acclaimed book.